Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from @AKwx TV to @NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Hello once again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's show. Up first, not hazardous weather graphic. There aren't any watches, advisories, or warnings out anywhere around the state. So for fire danger, for grass again, pretty low here across southern Alaska, the exception being right this area, the Copper River Basin. Some very high fire danger there. Also on the north slope up here, some very high fire danger, as well as Yukon Flats area, and then kind of an elevated area all the way down southwest there following the Yukon River right on out to the Delta. And also down here over the Panhandle, starting with the recent hot weather they've had, 70s, lower 80s, especially today, seeing some areas forecast for tomorrow to be very high as far as grass goes over the southern areas and up toward Haines and the Haines Highway area there. So moving on to spruce, even a narrower band, but still extending from the Yukon Flats, has the highest fire danger for spruce, very high there, and then kind of an elevated area extending again down along near the Yukon River all the way out to the Delta there. Otherwise, north and south of that line, pretty low for spruce, all the way up to the Arctic coast. Of course, not much spruce up there, but across southern Alaska, quite low areas there. Just a little bit of an elevated area there in the Copper River Basin. And again, some elevated areas also forecast for tomorrow there over the southeast coast. Temperatures not expected to be as warm tomorrow as you had today, but still pretty nice, well into the 70s in most areas, and still can reach 80 degrees in one or two locations down there. And from there, moving on to satellite imagery. System here south of the eastern Aleutians, sending moisture northward here, and that kind of colliding with another front with a system tracking eastward there along the Arctic coast, the low center anyway, front there extending down and then kind of linking up with the moisture here. Otherwise, out to the west, kind of a break over the central Aleutians, Bering Sea out through here. And then you can see some scattered and loose clouds here with the next system that'll be coming in late tonight and tomorrow, bringing gale force winds out to the western Aleutians, mostly just shimmying at 2. That'll be tomorrow. Otherwise, mostly sunny day, kind of some increasing high clouds here over south central Alaska in the afternoon, but a lot of sunshine into the Copper River Basin and Prince William Sound today. Less sun up here to the north, and temperatures down from what they were yesterday up there due to the clouds and cooler westerly flow coming in. But a lot of sunshine down across the southeast coast today, light winds and temperatures in the 70s, in some cases lower 80s or so. I believe, let's see, Haines had 82, I believe, for a high, and at least so far a high, and Hoona was above 80 degrees as well. Otherwise, on the chart today, clouds rolling into Kodiak Island, but rain staying back to the west here. Some light rain across the Alaska Peninsula and into the eastern Aleutians, mostly in the form of showers here south and west of the frontal boundary, and some light rain, not quite into the Pribilofs, kind of right on the edge there, extending up across Nunivak Island into the southwest interior. Some showers trying to get up into the Kuskokwim Valley and along the western Alaska Range today, with again the area clouds through here. Just some light precipitation. Earlier today, 0.05 of an inch fell at Bettles. That's since stopped with that moisture kind of sliding eastward there, breaking up, and some light rain, fog, areas of the western North Slope, Brooks Range, Arctic coastal areas. But again, amounts pretty light. The heaviest amounts were about 1/3 of an inch falling in the last 12 hours at both Platinum and Cape Newenham. Otherwise, just a few hundredths to maybe 1/10 of an inch elsewhere. And again, a lot of sunshine, warm temperatures here, Copper River Basin, actually south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, on down across all the Panhandle. And break, high pressure building out over the western Bering and Aleutians. And you can see the precipitation with the next system just coming onto the map. We'll see tonight that begins to push eastward, but not quite reaching Chimie-Attu tonight. Maybe some rain toward morning there. High pressure really dominating the remainder of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians and northeast flow, keeping this moisture to the south, but the low center close enough to bring a chance of light rain, possibly in Alaska, a little more likely there for the south coast of the Alaska Peninsula areas, and some showers southerly flow here, pull some showers up into Kodiak Island. Increasing clouds continue here for the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, all of south central Alaska, even Prince William Sound. And then the trailing edge of this front here bringing some rain into the Kuskokwim Valley. Light rain at times, nothing heavy. Showers possible up along the Alaska Range and maybe into North Wyandotte on up to Eagle as that front pushes through, and then clearing out behind it with light winds. Next system bringing increasing chances of moisture for the western Arctic coast on down to maybe Kivalina, as far south as Kivalina. Stays dry over the Panhandle. Some low clouds and fog continuing along the coast, especially the north coast up in towards just along the coast of Yakutat, the eastern North Gulf Coast. And then for tomorrow, another sunny day here for the Panhandle, mostly sunny in the north. Temperature still into the 70s in most areas there. And then moisture flow from south to north here continues to increase the clouds, brings a little bit better chance of some rain at some point in the day tomorrow, anywhere over south central Alaska into Prince William Sound. And Kodiak Island looks kind of showery and cloudy, a little cool with moisture all the way up to the southern slopes of the Alaska Range there. And mostly sunny here along the Yukon River Valley, right where that area of highest fire danger is. Forecast for tomorrow. That's, of course, nice to see it match up with the sunniest, driest areas there. And this front up here brings more rain into more light rain, more chances of light rain here to the central and western Arctic coast and North Slope, kind of trailing back down toward the Bering Strait. High pressure holding over the Bering Sea, but moving eastward enough to allow this front to bring gale force winds and some rain and fog into the far western Aleutians. We're only looking at about 30 to 35 knots for the strongest winds out here towards Chimie-Attu. Lighter winds, look for some low clouds and fog, could form really anywhere over the Bering Sea later tonight and into tomorrow. And this low far enough to the south, but close enough to keep a chance of showers over the Alaska Peninsula. And then for the day on Wednesday, weak low here near Shelikof Strait or Kodiak Island, south to north flow, and with a leftover moisture, a pretty good chance of rain coming into south central Alaska throughout the day on Wednesday. Cooler temperatures, Prince William Sound, same thing, North Gulf Coast. A little more showery here and a little cooler and cloudier for the Panhandle. Still some sun breaks though, and the risk of a shower or two. And then another cold front here, kind of elongated along or just south of the Brooks Range in the west here, down across the Selawik Valley into Kotzebue. Chance of light rain or showers along that frontal boundary up to the northeast there. High pressure along the coast, light winds, dry conditions, low clouds and fog. St. Lawrence Island, the Pribilofs along the coast, all the way to St. Lawrence Island. That same sort of pattern also up here along the Arctic coast, IFR or marginal VFR in areas there, mostly along the coast or offshore. And for the lows tonight, 40s and 50s across much of southern Alaska. The 50s a little more prevalent than the 40s. And for the highs tomorrow, lower 60s along the coast of the Panhandle, like Sitka, Port Alexander, 70 to 75 or higher over the inland waters and inside waters. Lower 70s, Copper River Basin, upper 50s, lower 60s here, south central Alaska, and lower lower 60s, Kuskokwim Valley near 60 for Kodiak. Lows again, mostly in the 50s, upper 40s in some locations. And for Wednesday afternoon highs, about the same, 65 to 75 for the Panhandle, near 70 in the Copper River Basin, upper 50s to lower 60s, south central Alaska, a little milder in the Kuskokwim Valley. Lows 30s Arctic coast, 40s to lower 50s in the interior, followed by highs tomorrow, 68 to 72 over interior Alaska here, 40s Arctic coast, except lower 60s in the north slope to eastern Arctic coast, followed by lows mid-50s around Fairbanks and Eielson Air Force Base, a little below freezing for some areas of the Arctic coast, and then highs 70 to 75 Yukon Flats, otherwise 65 to 70 for the Tanana Valley, 40-mile country areas. And for the southwest coast, lows in the 40s, highs tomorrow upper 40s to lower 50s, followed by lows 40 to 45 and highs 45 to 50.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tuesday morning flying weather showing IFR here from the central Aleutians. One branch extending northeastward here to the southwest coast, possibly into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Another branch along and south of the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula up into Kodiak Island, spreading into the western Gulf. Marginal VFR up along the Alaska Range. Otherwise VFR interior up to the eastern Arctic coast, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, on down the Panhandle. Another zone of IFR here from the Bering Strait down across St. Lawrence Island and the northern Bering Sea. And for the afternoon, IFR sliding eastward here, staying mostly to the south, but getting along the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula. It stays IFR for most of Kodiak Island. Marginal VFR conditions spread into central southern Cook Inlet as well as western Cook Inlet, and starting to fill in a little bit there northern Susitna Valley areas. But staying VFR here in the interior with IFR along the northwest coast, western Arctic coast, on down covering much of the northern central Bering Sea, and then on to the southwest into the western Aleutians. Adak and Atka, marginal VFR and IFR along the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Then for Wednesday morning, a lot more widespread IFR now over the Bering Sea, only Atka Island in the marginal VFR zone. Otherwise, IFR right up into the northern Bering through the western Bering Strait, Teller, Wales, those areas, western Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, and central and western Arctic coast seeing some IFR now. Marginal VFR along the east side, and then staying VFR here over the inland areas, but southern Alaska now, moisture coming on up in the morning, IFR increasing along the western Alaska Range, Kodiak Island into the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound, as well as starting to push onto the coast of the Panhandle. For the afternoon, that kind of burns back a little from the southeast coast, IFR right up along the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and VFR for Wednesday afternoon, spreading back into Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, much of interior Alaska stays VFR. And moving on to passes, Anatuvik, VFR tomorrow. Adigan, same forecast, VFR flying. And for the Lake Clark and Merrill passes, marginal VFR. Marginal for rainy, and then windy pass, marginal VFR with VFR in the northern entrance. And Isabel, that same pattern, lowest conditions will be on the southern approach, and then out the north side there, VFR into the valley. And for Mentasta, another VFR day coming up there, although you see an increase in the clouds. And for Tanita, starting out VFR, becoming marginal VFR at some point in the day tomorrow. The later in the day, the better chance that'll happen, especially through the afternoon toward evening. And for Portage, same forecast, Chilkoot and White, VFR. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 feet here over the Chukchi Sea, right along the western Arctic coast, then up to about 8,000 feet here just north of St. Lawrence Island, and 6,000 to 8,000 or so here in the central interior, 10,000 feet, Bristol Bay, right across northern Cook Inlet, and into the Panhandle, and also 12,000 feet here out over the west central Aleutians. And icing, next front pushing some more significant isolated moderate icing into the western Aleutians, and then also this moisture coming northward and northeastward. Pretty good chance of some isolated moderate rime icing here across south central Alaska into Prince William Sound. around, and then that disturbance cutting across the Arctic coast, also bringing elevated threat of some icing up in that area. And for the jet stream, basically low pressure here, Alaska Peninsula, westerly flow 85 knots here, 65 to 85 knots across the northern interior areas, and pretty light over the eastern Bering Sea, northwest about 65, cutting down across Atka Island. And at 9,000 feet, light winds for the Panhandle, but westerlies up to 45 knots here, western North Slope Brooks Range area. Northwest coast up to the east central Arctic coast. Light winds out over the Bering Sea, and 50-knot winds with that system coming in to the far western Aleutians, and that picks up to about 45 to 60 knots there for the western Aleutians at 3,000 feet. Otherwise, pretty light here, although 15 to 30-knot winds there for the western Arctic coast and North Slope. And from there, taking a look at turbulence, look for some moderate turbulence there along and on the lee side of the western Brooks Range, and then also significant turbulence coming in to the western Aleutians, pushing almost to Amchitka Island.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems. And the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar, and ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there and we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out of state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot. We've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so it'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Small craft advisories along the south coast of the Panhandle tomorrow for northwest winds at 25 knots. Central coast west-northwest at 15, and for the north coast, even lighter winds from the west at 10. Lynn Canal, south winds at 10 knots, northwest at 10 for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait looking at northwest winds of 15 knots with 3-foot seas. And for the day on Wednesday, west at 20 here for the south coast, central coast southwest at 10, and for the north coast, variable winds at about 10 knots with 4-foot seas. Lynn Canal now looking at a south wind at 20 knots with seas up to about 4 feet. Still light winds for Stevens Passage from the south at 10. Clarence Strait, southeast breeze, 10 knots. Prince William Sound, variable winds at 10 knots for the day on Tuesday. And west-southwest winds, 15 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Light variable wind conditions for the western coast here, south of the Kenai Peninsula, Resurrection Bay. Otherwise, Barren Island, southeast to 15 knots, southeast to 20 for Kamishak Bay. And for Cook Inlet, variable to north winds, 10 to 15 knots. For the day Wednesday, Cook Inlet, south to southwest breeze at 15 knots, seas at about 3 feet. Light variable wind conditions now for Kamishak Bay, Barren Islands, southeast at 15. And the North Gulf Coast, light variable winds at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, variable to east breeze at 10 knots. Kodiak Island, south to southwest winds, 15 to 20 knots for the day Tuesday. And variable winds, 10 to 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, east at 10. And for the day on Wednesday, here for the Alaska Peninsula, variable winds, 10 knots, pretty light, and seas only run 1 to 4 feet. Bristol Bay, light northwest breeze at 10. Kodiak Island, variable winds, 10 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. Eastern Aleutians, for Unalaska Island, variable winds at 10 knots. Unamak Island, north at 15. Same thing for Adak and Atka. North winds 15 knots. And then Some gale warnings here in the western Aleutians. That front approaches for, winds will be southeast for Tuesday, 30 to 35 knots, seas as high as 13 feet. Then for Wednesday, western Aleutians here west of Adak, south winds at 20 to 25 knots. Central Aleutians, south to southwest at 20. And for the eastern Aleutians, same forecast, winds south to southwest at 20 knots with 3 to 6 foot seas. And for the southwest coast for Tuesday, looking at north to northeast winds, 15 knots. And for the Pribilof Islands, north at 15, St. Matthew Island, west at 15, seas at about 5 feet in both those areas there. And for St. Lawrence Island, light north breeze at 10 knots and west at 10 for Norton Sound. And for Wednesday, St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound, west breeze 5 to 10, northwest at 10 for the southwest coast, southeast at 15 for the Pribilofs, and St. Matthew Island. That's where the strongest winds will be out in the Bering Sea, east at 20 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, we got small craft advisories for west to southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. And for the western Arctic coast, west winds at 20 knots, central coast south at 20. East side here, variable at 15. And for the day Wednesday, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, looking at west-southwesterlies at 15 knots. Southwest at 20 for the central coast, west 20 for the west side, and the Chukchi Sea, west and north winds 10 to 15 knots. For tonight, again, this weak cold front pushing eastward, maybe will be a band of light showers or light rain along with it there as it pushes east and then extends southwestward all the way down into the Kuskokwim Delta, and just a weak trailing edge there along the coast. And then this system will bring some light rain to the Alaska Peninsula, and southerly flow here will start to increase the moisture of Kodiak Island, and then the two systems will start to continue to increase the cloud south central Alaska, leading to some light rain tomorrow. Another front up here bringing some light rain to the north slope and Arctic coast. This system just barely affecting the Alaska Peninsula, but a stronger front out here to the west, bringing gale force winds and rain in with that, and then that really washes out as it pushes eastward on Wednesday. High pressure along the coast for fair conditions there. Another weak cold front with a chance of showers. Southeast interior, pretty damp.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.